Hi, my name is Kate, and this is a reading of my book, Matters to a Head, Cannabis, Mental Illness and Recovery. In this clip I'll be reading the introduction and first chapter. Stay tuned for future instalments. Introduction. Recently I watched an Australian documentary called Messing with Heads, which explores the links between heavy cannabis use and the onset of mental psychosis in teenagers and young adults. I tuned in because this is an issue that has affected my own life and that of others around me, yet it continues to occupy a grey area in discussion and debate in the public arena. My early dependence on cannabis grew over time into an addiction so complete that it rivaled that of any of the hard drug users I have met in my attempts at recovery. Over time, the drug altered my behaviour, my personality, my emotional landscape, my psychological functioning, and ultimately opened a crack inside my mind that is never completely closed. My obsession with smoking dope as a teenager and young adult really muddied the waters when I began to experience symptoms of a full-blown psychiatric illness in my mid-20s. I will never know with certainty whether the cannabis caused the illness or whether it exacerbated fissures in my mind that may have already existed. One thing is clear though, together the onset of bipolar disorder and my addiction to cannabis interacted to ransack my mind, spirit and life in a way that has taken 15 years to piece back together. Over many years my heavy cannabis use consumed my ambition, my motivation, and broke down my good sense of what was right and what was wrong. None of this happened overnight, and in fact the problematic effects of cannabis are often sneaky, insidious. They creep up on a user slowly and with stealth, not appearing with the rapid intensity of drugs such as P or LSD. My father once said to me rather sagely, "It is as though some people can get away with smoking marijuana and some can't, but by the time you find out you're a can't, it's already too late." That was certainly my experience. The perception in our society of cannabis as a soft drug does not factor into the equation any of the myriad human complexities that influence the effect the drug may have upon an individual, especially when smoking starts at a young age and becomes a regular habit or an addiction. The mind is a fragile ecosystem, and as I will explain through my story, I went down the road of discovering what happens when that ecosystem becomes too polluted to maintain a stable chemical and psychological environment. I discovered too late that my emotional, physical, social and spiritual selves were intricately entwined in the breakdown precipitated by my harmless cannabis use. All dimensions of myself fell prey to the cannabis cause and effect. No part of me was spared. Debate continues in contemporary New Zealand as to the rights and wrongs of liberalising legislation related to cannabis use, possession and supply. I am of the view that we are looking at this issue from a skewed perspective. The question being asked through debate in select committees and the media boils down to, should cannabis be legalised, decriminalised, made available for medical purposes, or retain its current legal status as a Class C drug? To my mind, the legal discussion is secondary to the more pressing issue of the difficulties faced by the can't sector of the population. How do we help or make provision for the people in our society who are experiencing significant harm from the drug and will do so irrespective of whether it is legal or not? Our psychiatric hospitals and prisons contain many such people. Like tobacco and alcohol, changing the legal status of cannabis will not change the fact that many of our people are seriously affected by the drug and need a lot of support to move out of the cannabis way of life. There are uncomfortable truths and deeper questions which emerge when the veil is lifted on the cannabis issue. Maybe when we can answer these questions, we will be in a better position to revisit the legal status of the drug. The recognition of dual diagnosis, sometimes termed dual disorder, is a recent acknowledgement by the psychiatric profession that an individual suffering both drug and or alcohol problems and a diagnosable mental illness presents with a unique and complex set of difficulties at the treatment coalface. This book sets out to examine some of these complexities. In doing so, it explores the nature of addiction and mental illness through my own experiences, both personal and professional, and through the lives of others I have met along the way. I have attempted to provide a discussion that will be of relevance to sufferers, family members, and professionals working in the many fields which intersect with the dual diagnosis individual. The book explores why it is in the best interests of us all to search for a way forward. I hope you will find the book both a useful and optimistic insight into the illness and recovery process, and a resource for informing learning around the sometimes perplexing topic of dual diagnosis. In lay terms, my experiences took me on a wild ride. I agree, I'm not exactly the poster girl for recreational drug use, but if telling my story and sharing my insights helps just one person move towards recovering their sanity and freedom from active addiction, then the story will have been worth the telling. Chapter 1. Hitchhiking. Up the motorway. Two young stoned females doing a Thelma and Louise, without the car. It didn't take long to get picked up though, and the driver took us as far as the outskirts of the city. This was good. The traffic on this stretch of highway would more likely be going north. We had to wait a while for our next ride. We hung around on the side of the motorway with our thumbs out, pulling faces and cussing at the cars going by. Eventually a middle-aged man in a flash-red car pulled over. He was going all the way through to Auckland, so we jumped in. We were lucky with that ride. The guy didn't think much of our plan to travel such a long way at the mercy of total strangers. He said he was worried for our safety and agreed to take us to keep us out of danger. We weren't even thinking about danger. We had so many drugs on board our systems we weren't thinking anything much. It was all about living in the moment and being charmed by the apparent acts of synchronicity that the universe was bestowing upon us, the good old cosmos. I don't remember much about that drive except that it didn't take long. He was a fast but thankfully cautious driver, and the car was equipped with a powerful sound system. And he didn't try anything on. I do remember him giving us a bit of a lecture after we'd stopped for a break at Putararu and Phil and I had disappeared behind the toilet block for a quick toke. We were lucky in more ways than one that day, and not because of any good management on our part. I'm not entirely sure of the sequence of events. There's a bit of a blank between Putararu in the afternoon and finding ourselves that night, having reached our destination, amongst the heaving crowd of fans filtering through the entrance to the stadium where the concert was about to start. We'd made it. Ah, that's right, technical hitch. No money and no tickets. I hadn't known Phil for long, and I didn't know much about her, but I was discovering on this trip that she was a very resourceful and brazen young woman. She laid out the plan and we high-fived it with mischievous anticipation. We joined the throng heading inside and started pushing our way down the centre, trying to avoid the burly security guards on either side of the door. Of course they spotted us as not having passes, and they pulled us up short. Phil was at the ready and launched into the convoluted speech she had prepared about how we were visiting from a radio station and our guest passes hadn't arrived on time, and if they just checked their lists they would find our names amongst the comps. We were meeting our colleagues inside and they would vouch for us, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile the crowd was piling up behind us, and we could all hear the opening strains of Cypress Hill's introduction coming from the auditorium. The remaining ticket holders outside suddenly mobilised to launch a concerted push through the outer doors, and just as the crowd began to surge forward, Phil grabbed me and yelled, "Run!" So we did. Taking advantage of the general pandemonium, we bolted through the crowd and into the darkness of the stadium just as the music started pumping. We were in. Mission accomplished. Cypress Hill's big hit at that time was a rap number that I had on high rotate at the radio station where Phil and I were volunteers. In a feat of intellectual lyricism, the song is called Insane in the Brain. Its repetitive chanting chorus goes like this. Insane in the membrane, got no brain, going insane. Insane in the membrane, over and over. I liked it because it was about smoking drugs and going mad, my favourite topics. If I'd ever stopped to think about it, I would have noticed that I'd become unrecognisable from the A student I had been at university only 3 years previously. I had even been invited by my faculty to study towards a master's degree, which I rejected, mainly because I couldn't be bothered, my dope habit even then chewing away at my motivation and ambitions. At high school in my 5th form year, I'd been awarded prizes for being top of the class in 3 subjects out of 5. In the 6th form, I'd been accredited my university entrance qualification, and over the summer break I went to Australia for 3 months on an exchange scholarship. In my 7th form year I was elected head girl, a title I managed to hold on to for only a brief few weeks, publicly stripped of the rank after cajoling the head boy and a couple of other prefects to go drinking and joyriding with me. For the last time, though, had my capers led me back to the headmaster's office. I was so keen to leave home and school that the suspension I gained as punishment was the opportunity I needed to get away. In the early days, I would have been what you might call a high-functioning cannabis addict. Despite my preoccupation with my extracurricular activities and my knack for getting into trouble, I worked hard as a student and later in employment. I basically lived 2 lives as a teenager and a young adult, successful student and hard-working employee on the one hand, binge-drinking, pot-smoking party girl on the other. I was careful not to let those 2 worlds meet, and I peopled my spheres with acquaintances who did not necessarily know of each other's existence. In my mid-20s, the facade collapsed in a brutal and spectacular episode of mental illness. This and the subsequent period of hospitalisation stripped me to become a person I'd never known. My way of life might have caught up with me, but for now I couldn't stop. Which is how I came to be on a runaway trip to Auckland, completely smashed out of my head and chanting Insane in the Membrane, along with Cypress Hill and 3,000 other wasted sots. My luck nearly ran out at that concert, though. I lit a joint in the auditorium, A, because I was an idiot, and B, because smoking dope had become so normal to me that I would, from time to time, completely forget I was doing something illegal. Then I noticed one of the burly security guards seeming to push through the crowd towards me. Shit, was it, or was I just being paranoid? I couldn't work it out, so I scarpered anyway, losing myself amongst the pogoing bodies to go and search for Phil. I found her on the edge of the vast people sea, and we realised we hadn't completely fulfilled our mission just yet. There was one last part to it. Before we'd arrived at the show, we'd rolled a special joint of South Island sunshine just for Cypress and his crew, kind of a welcome to God's zone present. Somehow we needed to get it to him. So we hovered around the backstage entrance until yet another burly security guard accosted us. "You can't go back there, you know," he said gruffly. Did we have the energy or feeling of providence to throw one last stunt? Well, not quite. We thought we might have pushed our run of luck already, so we decided to forego attempting to get backstage and instead shoved the Ziploc bag and its contents into the guard's hand. "Please give this to Cypress, you will, won't you? It's a present from his fans, he has to get it." The burly security guard flicked us a raised eyebrow and a look that said, "Yeah, right," took the bag from us, and we were out of there.